Hey everyone, I'm here with Chad Trainer, one of the founders and creators of Low Bono and Pro Bono. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to meet with Chad, and he was telling me about the very exciting projects that he's working on with Low Bono and Pro Bono. So I wanted to chat with him and share with you guys what he's doing, and hopefully it can be a resource for you guys to scale your business and learn more about limited scope representation and what they're doing. So hey, thanks for joining us, Jad.
Thanks for the opportunity, Dan.
Sure, sure. And so we talked a couple of weeks ago, but can you share with us again, like, your background, your origin story, and then how you came up with what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I'm an attorney, barred in California and New York. And so basically how I got started on the whole concept of pro bono and low bono is my dream was to be a public defender. I ended up going to University of Virginia and I graduated right smack in the global financial crisis of 2008. Perfect timing. And I really struggled to find a job. Past the New York bar, there were no jobs. A year and a half later, past the California bar, and there were still no jobs. And in the beginning, I focused on public defender positions. Then I expanded to public interest as a whole. And then in the end, I was basically applying for every law-related job under the sun, including legal secretary positions. And so later on, I ended up in the whole startup space. And it really struck me as the gig economy started to really bloom that one of the most broken industries is our own, the legal industry. It struck me as extremely ironic that there's 85% of the population in this country that has no access to an attorney, and yet there are so many new grads who are really struggling to find employment. And for those of us who have always been focused on access to justice and who went to law school in order to help people, it's particularly painful that you don't have that opportunity to help people. So first I came up with the concept of pro bono. And the idea with pro bono was to connect very low income individuals, so those who would typically qualify for legal aids, and yet legal aids are overburdened, so they have to turn away most of the people who qualify for their help and need their help. So there is a huge need in the low-income segment, despite the fact that legal aids do exist. So we connect those very low-income individuals with attorneys who need practical experience. So who needs practical experience? Obviously, new attorneys, because law school doesn't do enough to prepare us to actually practice law. New attorneys are competing for relatively few entry-level positions. And in order to even become a real attorney, pretty much you're forced into getting that first job to learn the ropes. But that first job is more and more elusive. So we allow attorneys to address their number one obstacle to gaining employment, which is their lack of practical experience. So there's obviously one key puzzle piece. If you're a new attorney and you want to take on a pro bono case, but you don't have enough practical experience, you need an experienced attorney mentor. So on pro bono, we created an ecosystem where if you're an attorney who needs practical experience, you can find the sort of case that fits your experiential goals. And you can also find an experienced attorney mentor to help guide you through your work. And if you're actually an experienced attorney who is very busy but wants to give back, you can find a case that interests you and then a mentee who can take on a lot of the grunt work that's involved in pro bono representation. And you could sit back and give high-level legal advice, and you're actually doubling the impact of your pro bono hours by both providing invaluable training to a mentee who needs that training, while at the same time ensuring quality representation to a low-income client who needs the help. So that was the idea for pro bono, but the access to justice gap is much bigger than just those who qualify for free legal representation traditionally. So it turns out that working class and middle class people also are in a really rough spot because they typically can't afford market rate, at least full representation at market rate. And we'll get into that in a second. And yet they don't qualify for legal aids. So in a way, you could even argue that they're kind of in a little worse off position because they have absolutely zero shot at getting the assistance they need. So in addressing the question of what do you do with the working class and middle class people who don't qualify for free legal help, I did a lot of research, and it turns out that a lot of solos and small firms need more clients. So I thought, well, if they need more clients, then perhaps they could offer their services at more affordable rates and actually do well for their practices by serving these moderate income individuals while at the same time doing good for society. So that was the idea for pro bono and then low bono, or rather how those ideas originated.
Okay. And you actually have a very interesting background after law school you shared with me, when we met. Can you share, again, how you got into the startup world, where it took you into the world, and, what some of the skills that you use there that you developed there into low bono and pro bono?
Sure. Yeah. So uh, let's rewind back to 2008. I'd sat for the New York bar, and it was very clear that there were no law jobs, especially public defender jobs, which is what I actually wanted to do. So I ended up going to Russia to find work. And then after a year of working there, I worked for a subcontractor for USAID. After a year of working there, I wasn't ready to give up on my law degree, so I came back to the States, took the California bar, passed that. It turns out I had passed the New York bar, but I'm from California, so passed the California bar, and then I embarked on my year and a half long job search. And in the end, I ended up back in Russia because it was so difficult to break into the industry. And mind you, I was fortunate to go to a relatively prestigious school as well. It didn't even matter. Mm-hmm. So when I went back to Russia the second time, it sounds ridiculously random, but in the end, I was basically directing marketing efforts for a large real estate development company. And I'd also gained some sales experience as well. And so when I finally came back to the States, this is 2014, I had a very strange resume. I've worn several different hats. And the one space that really values having that diverse experience and also the risk taking of having gone to Russia on tourist visas, not once, but twice to find a job, is the startup space. So I ended up back in my hometown area of the Bay Area. And I worked for a couple of different startups as the first full-time employee. And that's when both I saw the potential of the power of tech startups and also saw this opportunity to really make a difference with pro bono and low bono. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. You kind of have quite a journey to where you're at now, and what most people wouldn't think, would have gotten here. Now, we talk a little bit more about low bono, and then how did you kind of narrow down into the limited scope representation as kind of the key point of low bono?
That's a great question. So again, low bono is about allowing solo attorneys in small firms to, when they need more clients, they can offer their services more affordably for moderate income individuals. Mm-hmm. So there really are a couple different ways that attorneys can make their services more affordable. An obvious one is to drop your normal hourly rate if you're providing full representation. But a lot of attorneys, obviously, that's not a very enticing thing. One, sure, maybe you're operating below capacity in the moment, but then you sign on a few full representation clients at a discounted rate, and then your business picks up. Mm-hmm. And now you're tied to those clients. So that's not really, sometimes it actually can make a lot of financial sense to attorneys, but at other times it's something that they don't really want to do. And with that being said, it also turns out that even if you were to discount your normal rates from, let's say your normal rate is $300 an hour, if you were to drop it down to $150 an hour, full representation is also going to become unaffordable for a working class person relatively quickly. So, so then the idea for limited scope really sounds more enticing. Limited scope is basically identifying a very targeted area of assistance where you can make the biggest difference for the client. Very often, that could be something like drafting a motion for the client, laying out the client's legal arguments, which is something they would really, really struggle to do, and then allowing the client to, to represent themselves in hearings after that. Of course, that's not perfect representation, and that's something that, I mean, obviously, traditionally, attorneys have provided their services full representation, and that's ideal. But it gives your client a very, very strong chance of getting the legal outcome that they want while also being something that they can afford. And if you choose limited scope representation, then you don't necessarily need to discount your normal rate in order to make your services more affordable. A few hours of your time is inherently more affordable than, over 100 hours of your time in full representation. So that's the idea behind limited scope. And it can be very template driven and very efficient for attorneys as well. So very profitable.
So, what are some of the kind of ethical concerns that other attorneys have brought up to you about limited scope representation?
So when it comes to limited scope representation, you need to be very careful to delineate responsibilities. So you need, in your retainer, you need to specify exactly what you're going to be handling, and then also what the client needs to handle for themselves. And in the beginning, that can be daunting for some attorneys, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that difficult.
And do you kind of, for the attorneys on your platform, do you kind of help them through that particular process if they need it? Help them work through some of those ethical issues that, hey, all you really need to do is this, and make sure you know what you're doing and you know what the client's doing.
We definitely have provided guidance in the past. More my co-founder,
Mm-hmm.
Scott, than me. He's also an attorney.
Yeah.
And in fact, he used to help run one of the largest legal incubators in the country. So he's very used to coaching attorneys through limited scope.
Okay, so let's talk about scalability, and as obviously law school doesn't teach us to be lawyers, certainly does not teach us to be business owners, and
Yes,
so
that's also true.
help some people out there understand like why sometimes it's better just to get a limited scope representation, even though you might get less dollars, right? Rather than taking on the whole case. And even though you might make more money, it might make more business sense to take limited scope representation.
Yeah, sure. So the biggest practice area on Lo Bono right now is family law. And that's by far right now. And in family law, every family law attorney knows that family law clients aren't necessarily the easiest. I mean, it's a very emotional time for your clients. And one thing that we've heard from family law attorneys who do use limited scope is that they do appreciate not being tied to a client for forever. So let's go back to that example of drafting an RFO. If your retainer states that you're just going to draft that RFO for the client, then basically after you're done with that, you're done. You're done with the client. So that client's not, it's emotionally easier for a lot of family law attorneys we've seen. And then also, like I said, it can be, the more you do a particular type of limited scope assistance, the better you get at it, and the more efficient you get at it. So you did have a point that if you're doing full representation, ultimately you're going to get more money from one client. But there's plenty of volume of business on Lo Bono, and we're really reducing your client acquisition cost so that you don't need to make that much money off of a client. So it can be very, very profitable for attorneys.
So there's this quote from Tony Robbins is like boring is good, and I think what he meant by that is like find something that is easily replicatable, something that's really repeatable, and then just master the hell out of that.
Yeah.
And
yep.
and I think that kind of gets to the heart of limited scope. And back to your example, is like once if you can master like say the RFO, and you're getting the same fact pattern pretty much every time, pretty soon you got it dialed in. Pretty soon you can have a paralegal do it or someone else do it, and your effective rate will actually probably skyrocket through the roof because you're so efficient at it.
Yeah, in another thing, again, like we're talking about the business side of things, but I also want to stress that don't lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of working class and middle class people out there who they don't have very many options, so you can make a big difference for them as well. And the more people you help who otherwise wouldn't be able to get representation, the bigger a difference you're making as an attorney as well, which I think a lot of us, that means a lot to a lot of us.
Yeah. I think, when we enter into law school, we kind of see the world like we want to change the world, right?
Yeah,
And then we realize the world's a pretty big place, and it's hard to change it. Maybe we can only change our world, the people
exactly.
that we interact with. And so I think,
Yeah,
you know, organizations like yours, where we can directly impact, people going through a divorce, or you need some family law help at reasonable and affordable rates. Um, you know, Not only we provide a good service to them, um, we feel good about using our law degree to help them, um, you know, get away from a abusive, family member or whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So our motto for Lo Bono is do well for your practice while doing good for society.
Okay, that's really good. Really good. So, if someone wants to, if they're a family law attorney and they're watching this, what's the next step if they want to learn more about limited scope or want to get into your platform?
Well, one, you can reach out to me. Um, and I don't know, should I just on air say my email
Yeah,
address, or I can give
go
it
and
to
stay on
you?
it, and I'll add it to the notes as well.
Sure. So chad.trainer, and the same spelling as dog trainer, TRAINER, at lowbono.com. And the spelling for that is LOWBOKNOW.com. I love to meet the attorneys who are on our platform or who are interested in our platform. And obviously, I'm very passionate about what we're doing, so I would love to have a conversation.
And you did say family law is by far the biggest area of law. Are you seeing any other areas of law that maybe are emerging?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. So family law is our biggest, and then in second place, maybe estate and employment law at the moment. And employment law is actually is a great practice area as well. Very often you can get attorney's fees. That's something
Oh,
to not,
okay.
yeah, not lose sight of. So um, working class and middle class people can have lucrative cases for you.
Awesome. Awesome. So hey, thanks, Chad, for having a conversation with me. I'm very excited about what the future holds for pro bono and low bono, and certainly we'll share your message out with our community, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate
All
the
right.
opportunity. Take
All right.
care.
Take care.
Bye.